Catherall had spent 300 years studying species across the galaxy. He had documented the rise of empires and the fall of civilizations. He had watched proud races crumble to dust and young ones reach for the stars. In all that time, he had never encountered a species quite like the humans. He remembered the day they first arrived at the Galactic Concord Station. Their ship was small and ugly by galactic standards. It looked like something a child might build from scrap metal. The elder races had laughed quietly among themselves as the human delegation stepped off their vessel. These creatures were soft. They had no claws, no armored skin, no natural weapons of any kind. Their eyes were too large and too expressive. They smiled too much. Catherall was assigned to document them, as he had documented dozens of new species before. It was considered a minor assignment. The humans were expected to fade into obscurity within a few generations. Another forgettable addition to the galaxy's catalog of lesser beings, but something about them caught his attention from the very beginning. He watched their ambassador, a woman named Laura Beckett, negotiate trade agreements with species that had been traveling between stars when her ancestors still lived in caves. She sat across from beings that could crush her skull with a single blow, and she smiled at them. Not the nervous smile of prey hoping to avoid becoming dinner. It was the warm, genuine smile of someone who truly believed that friendship was possible with anyone. Representatives of the elder races looked at her with barely hidden contempt. The Valorians, Catherall's own people, had achieved interstellar travel 50,000 years ago. The Morthax had ruled their corner of the galaxy for twice that long. And here was this fragile little creature, barely a century removed from her first moon landing, speaking to them as equals. "Your species is very young," the Morthax delegate said to her one day, his voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you do not understand how things work in this galaxy. The strong take what they want. The weak survive by being useful or by staying out of the way. Which will your people choose to be?" Laura Beckett had looked at him for a long moment. Her smile never wavered, but something shifted in her eyes. Something that made Catherall pause his writing and lean forward. "We choose to be friends," she said simply. "We choose to trade, to learn, to share. We choose peace." The Morthax laughed. "And if peace is not an option? If someone decides your little worlds would make good mining colonies? What then?" "Then we would rather not find out," Laura said. Her voice was still soft, still kind. "And neither would you." The Morthax laughed again, louder this time. So did the other delegates. Catherall noted the exchange in his journal and marked it as typical behavior from a young species. Bravado was common among those who had never faced real threats. The humans would learn humility soon enough. Over the following years, Catherall continued his observations. He visited Earth and walked through their cities. He was struck by how chaotic everything seemed. Humans rushed everywhere, always busy, always building something new. They tore down old structures and put up new ones. They argued constantly among themselves about everything, from politics to art to the proper way to prepare food. They spent enormous resources on things that seemed utterly pointless to Catherall. Music, paintings, stories. They had thousands of languages and millions of songs. They built monuments to people who had done nothing more than write beautiful words or create pleasing sounds. They celebrated athletes who could run fast or throw balls with accuracy, treating them like heroes of legend. And they loved a bitter brown liquid called coffee more than any rational being should love anything. Catherall cataloged them as a level 2 civilization, technologically adolescent, spiritually naive, militarily negligible. They had a small defense fleet, barely enough to patrol their own territory. They're soldiers trained mostly for disaster relief and peacekeeping. They seem more interested in exploring than in conquering. They are harmless, he wrote in his official report. A curious species, creative and energetic, but ultimately of no significance to galactic affairs. They pose no threat to anyone and will likely remain a minor presence in the outer territories for the foreseeable future. He believed every word. Catherall attended a human cultural event during one of his research visits. It was something they called a concert, where thousands of humans gathered to listen to organized sound. He expected to be bored. Instead, he found himself strangely moved as the music swelled and the humans around him wept openly at the beauty of it. Afterward, he spoke with an elderly human man who had tears still drying on his wrinkled face. "Why do you cry?" Catherall asked. The music was pleasant, but surely not worth such emotion. The old man smiled at him. That piece was written by a man who lived 400 years ago. He was deaf when he composed it. He never heard a single note, but he created something that still makes people weep centuries later. He wiped his eyes. That is what we are. We take our pain and we turn it into beauty. We take our suffering and we make it sing. Catherall noted this in his journal, but did not understand it. How could a species so obsessed with art and emotion ever survive in a galaxy ruled by strength and violence? He would learn the answer soon enough. In his final report of that period, Catherall wrote a passage that he would later wish he could erase from existence. The humans are a gentle people. They value creation over destruction, cooperation over competition. They are perhaps the least threatening species I have ever studied. The galaxy has nothing to fear from them. He filed the report and moved on to other assignments, confident that he had understood the humans completely. He was wrong. He was so terribly, terribly wrong. The message arrived on a quiet morning. Catherall was reviewing old documents in his office when his supervisor appeared at the door with an expression he had never seen before. Something between confusion and fear. "There has been an incident," the supervisor said. "The Carthex Dominion has destroyed a human colony. You are to document the aftermath." Catherall felt a small twinge of sympathy. The Carthex were brutal conquerors who had crushed a dozen species under their heel. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who resisted. A human colony would have stood no chance against them. "How many casualties?" he asked. "All of them. 1.2 million humans." The Carthex called it a territorial correction. Catherall closed his eyes. 1.2 million. Even by his long-lived standards, it was a tragedy. The humans would be devastated. He expected to document a species in mourning, perhaps begging the Galactic Concord for protection or withdrawing from contested space entirely. Travel to Earth to witness their response. What he found was something else entirely. The streets were quiet. Not the quiet of despair, but the quiet of focus. Humans moved with purpose, speaking in low voices. There were no wails of grief, no public displays of anguish. There was only silence and a strange, heavy tension that Catherall could feel in his bones. He made his way to the United Earth Assembly, where the human leaders had gathered to decide their response. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation on the planet. Catherall found a seat in the observation gallery and prepared to take notes. A man walked to the central podium. His name was Nathan Cole, a military commander with gray at his temples and lines on his face that spoke of years of service. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if every step carried tremendous weight. He did not shout. He did not pound his fist or call for vengeance. He simply stood at the podium and looked out at the assembly with eyes that held something Catherall had never seen in a human before. Something cold and ancient and terrible. Lorne 7 was a farming colony, Nathan said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. We sent our best and brightest there to build a new life on a new world. Teachers, doctors, engineers, farmers, families. He pressed a button, and images appeared on the screens around the chamber. A school with bright paintings on the walls. A hospital with gardens on the roof. A community center where children learned to play music. This was Sunrise Elementary School, Nathan continued. 412 children attended classes there. They were learning about the solar system when the bombs fell. None of them survived. The chamber was silent. Not a single person moved. Nathan showed more images. A young couple smiling on their wedding day. An old woman holding her newborn great-grandchild. A group of teenagers laughing at a birthday party. These are just a few of the 1.2 million people we lost, he said. Each one had a name. Each one had dreams. Each one mattered. He paused and looked directly at the assembly. The Cartheks believe we are weak because we choose peace. They think our kindness is a flaw, our compassion a vulnerability. They looked at us and saw prey. His voice dropped even lower, and Kethril had to strain to hear him. They will learn the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. A murmur ran through the chamber. Kethril felt the hair on his arms rise. There was something in the air now, something electric and dangerous. I am not asking for sanctions, Nathan said. I am not asking for negotiations or treaties or diplomatic pressure. I am asking this assembly to authorize something we have not done in over 2 centuries. He straightened his shoulders and spoke the words. Clearly, I am asking for total war. Cathril's translator struggled with the phrase. It had no equivalent in the Valorian language. War was war. What did total mean in this context? The vote was called. Every representative stood. Every single one. The motion passed unanimously. Kethril expected cheering, celebration, the bloodthirsty roar of a species eager for revenge. Instead, the assembly fell silent once more. The representatives looked at each other with grim faces. Some wept quietly. Others simply nodded and walked out to begin their work. He managed to speak with Nathan Cole briefly after the assembly. You do not seem happy, Kethril observed. Your people have chosen to fight. Is that not what you wanted? Nathan looked at him with those cold, ancient eyes. Happy? He shook his head slowly. No, I am not happy. None of us are happy. We wanted to be left alone. We wanted to build and create and explore. We wanted peace. Then why choose war? Nathan was quiet for a long moment. There is an old saying among my people, he finally said. Those who beat their swords into plowshares will plow for those who do not. We chose to make plowshares. The Cartheks chose to make swords. And now they have forced us to remember what we did with our swords before we put them down. He turned and walked away, leaving Kethril alone with a growing sense of unease. That night, Kethril looked up at the stars from his quarters on Earth. They seemed different somehow, colder, more distant. He began to suspect that he had made a terrible mistake in his assessment of humanity. The silence that had fallen over Earth was not the silence of grief. It was the silence before a storm. Kethril watched humanity transform over the following 18 months. It was like watching a calm ocean become a hurricane. Everything changed, and it changed fast. The factories that had produced consumer goods began producing weapons. The shipyards that had built exploration vessels began building warships. The scientists who had studied distant stars began designing systems to destroy them. Every resource, every mind, every pair of hands was directed toward a single purpose. The humans called it mobilization. Kethril called it terrifying. He visited a manufacturing district that had once produced farming equipment. Giant machines that used to build tractors and harvesters now stamped out armor plating and missile components. The workers moved with mechanical precision, their faces set in expressions of grim determination. A young woman approached him. Her name was Samantha Vance, and her hands were stained with grease and metal dust. She had been a botanist before the war, studying plant genetics in a quiet laboratory. Now she designed propulsion systems for warships. "You look confused," she said to him. "I am trying to understand," Catherall admitted. "Your people spent generations building a peaceful society. You valued art and music and exploration. How can you change so quickly?" Samantha wiped her hands on a rag and looked at him with tired eyes. "We did not change," she said. "We just stopped pretending." Pretending? Pretending that we had forgotten what we were capable of. She gestured at the factory around them. "Do you know the history of my species? We have fought each other for thousands of years. We have built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We have committed acts of violence that would make the Carthex look like children playing at war." She paused and met his eyes directly. "We chose peace because we knew what the alternative was. We built a peaceful society because we understood the cost of war better than anyone. But choosing peace does not mean we forgot how to fight. It means we chose not to." Catherall felt a chill run through him. "And now? Now we have been reminded why we built those weapons in the first place." He left the factory and traveled to the orbital shipyards above Earth. What he saw there made him question everything. He thought he knew about this species. Ships were being built at a rate that defied comprehension. Not the small, fragile vessels he had seen before, but massive warships bristling with weapons. They were ugly and brutal, designed with a single purpose in mind. These were not ships for exploration or trade. These were ships built to kill. He read the names painted on their hulls: Reckoning, Consequence, Judgment, Remember. VORN-7. The largest ship was called the Eternal Vigil. It was a dreadnought, bigger than any human vessel ever built. Its weapons could crack a moon in half. Its shields could withstand a direct hit from a stellar cannon. It was a monument to human engineering and human rage. Catherall met Admiral Derek Holloway on the observation deck of a space station overlooking the shipyards. The Admiral was an older man with white hair and kind eyes. He looked like someone's grandfather, the type of person who would bounce children on his knee and tell them stories. He was also the supreme commander of all human military forces. "Impressive, is it not?" the Admiral said, nodding at the ships below. "It is unprecedented," Catherall replied. "No species in recorded history has ever mobilized this quickly or this completely." The Admiral smiled sadly. "We are very good at war. We always have been. It is not something we are proud of, but it is true. Are you not afraid? The Carthex have 40,000 warships. You have only 8,000, and many of those are still under construction." Admiral Holloway turned to look at him. There was no fear in his eyes. No doubt. Only a calm certainty that Catherall found deeply unsettling. "Let me tell you something about humans," the Admiral said. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the most advanced. But we have one advantage that no other species seems to possess. What is that? We do not know when to quit." He turned back to the window. "When we fight until we win or until there is nothing left of us. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We do not negotiate. We just keep coming until the job is done." He pointed at a ship being fitted with weapons. Every person working on that vessel had a friend or family member on. VORN-7. Every pilot who will fly these ships carries the names of the dead in their hearts. The Carthex killed 1.2 million of our people and thought they were sending a message. His voice grew quiet. They were right. They just got the wrong message. They told us that peace was no longer an option. They told us that our children would never be safe as long as they existed. They told us that we had to choose between our values and our survival. He looked at Kethro with eyes that suddenly seemed very old. They should not have made us choose. As Kethro left the station, he passed a young engineer walking the other way. She was humming softly to herself. It took him a moment to recognize the tune. It was the same piece of music he had heard at the concert years ago. The one that made humans weep. Now they were humming it as they built weapons of war. Kethro realized that he was witnessing something the galaxy had never seen before. A peaceful species turning itself into an engine of destruction. Not because they wanted to, but because they had been given no other choice. The humans had always known how to make beautiful music. Now they were about to show the galaxy that they also knew how to make war. The human fleet jumped into Carthek space on a cold morning by Earth's calendar. Kethro was aboard the dreadnought Eternal Vigil, embedded with the crew as an official observer for the Galactic Concord. He had requested the assignment himself. He needed to see what would happen next. Captain Megan Torres stood on the bridge, watching the tactical displays light up with enemy contacts. She was a small woman with dark hair and calm brown eyes. She quoted poetry between tactical orders and kept a photograph of her daughter taped to her command console. "Contact," the sensor officer reported. "Carthek's home fleet is mobilizing. 42,000 vessels and counting." Kethro felt his heart sink. The humans had brought just over 8,000 ships. Even with their new weapons and technology, the numbers were impossible. They were outnumbered 5-1. "They are going to be slaughtered," he whispered. Captain Torres glanced at him with a slight smile. "Watch," she said simply. Carthek's fleet formed into their traditional battle formation. It was a wall of steel and firepower that had crushed every enemy it had ever faced. Their commanders broadcast demands for surrender, promising quick deaths if the humans gave up immediately. The human fleet did not respond. Instead, they began to move. Kethro had studied military tactics for centuries. He had seen 100 different species wage war in 100 different ways. But he had never seen anything like what the humans did next. Their ships did not fight as individual units. They fought as one organism. Destroyers shielded cruisers. Cruisers protected battleships. Fighters swarmed around capital ships like angry insects. Every movement was coordinated with impossible precision, and when a human ship was damaged beyond repair, its crew did not abandon it. They flew it directly into the enemy. The first suicide run came from a frigate called the Morning Star. Its engines were destroyed, its weapons offline, its hull breached in a dozen places. Instead of evacuating, its captain aimed a burning wreck at a Carthek's carrier and accelerated. The explosion tore through the enemy formation like a fist through paper. "Why do they do that?" Kethro asked, his voice shaking. "Why do they not save themselves?" Captain Torres watched the display with steady eyes. "Because they know that their deaths will save their friends, their families, their children." She paused as another human ship rammed into a Carthek's battleship. To die protecting the ones you love is not a waste. It is a gift. The battle raged for hours. Human ships fell by the hundreds. Carthek's ships fell by the thousands. For every human vessel destroyed, it seemed to take 10 enemies with it. Lieutenant Kyle Dawson was a fighter pilot, just 23 years old. His ship was hit during a strafing run, its weapons destroyed and its engines failing. Kethro watched the young man's final transmission on the bridge monitors. "This is Dawson," he said calmly. "I am going in. Tell my mom I love her." Then he aimed his crippled fighter at a Carthek's carrier's reactor core and flew. Straight into it, the carrier exploded in a ball of nuclear fire, taking 2 escort ships with it. "For the kids of Vorn 7, Dawson said as the flames consumed him. The bridge crew did not cheer. They simply bowed their heads for a moment, then returned to their stations. Catherall found himself weeping. He did not know why. After 11 hours of fighting, the Carthax Armada was broken. 42,000 ships reduced to debris and drifting hulks. The human fleet had lost nearly half its number, but they had won. They had won against impossible odds. The surviving ships moved toward the Carthax homeworld. Catherall expected bombardment, mass destruction, the kind of genocide that the Carthax themselves would have carried out. Instead, the humans landed ground forces with surgical precision. They did not bomb cities. They did not kill civilians. They targeted military installations, weapons factories, and government buildings. Nothing else. The Carthax ruling council was captured alive. They would be tried for genocide by a human court. Evidence would be presented. Witnesses would testify. Justice would be served, not revenge. Catherall accompanied Captain Torres on a walk through the conquered capital city. Carthax civilians watched from windows and doorways, their fear obvious. They expected the same treatment they would have given to a defeated enemy. They expected death. Instead, human soldiers handed out food and medical supplies. "I do not understand," Catherall said. "They killed over 1 million of your people. Why do you not destroy them completely?" Captain Torres stopped walking and looked at the terrified faces watching her. "Because we are not them," she said quietly. "We came here to remove a threat, not to become one. We destroyed their ability to make war. We captured those responsible for the massacre. But these people?" She gestured at the civilians. "They did not drop those bombs. They did not choose to attack us. They were just living their lives." She turned to face him directly. "We did not want to be this. We did not want to come here with fire and death. But they made us remember what we are capable of, and now they have seen it. That is enough. We will not become monsters to punish monsters." She walked on, leaving Catherall standing in the street. Surrounded by the aftermath of humanity's terrible awakening, he understood now why the elder races had begun to fear these soft, smiling creatures. They could destroy you utterly if you forced them to, and then they would help you rebuild. That was more terrifying than simple cruelty could ever be. 1 year after the war ended, Catherall returned to his work at the Galactic Concord Archives. His document on humanity had become the most requested text in the entire collection. Species that had ignored humans for decades now studied every word he had written. They wanted to understand how they had been so wrong. Catherall wanted to understand the same thing. He watched the galaxy change around him. Human diplomats no longer sat at the back of Concord meetings. They sat at the front, and when they spoke, everyone listened. Elder races that had mocked humanity for generations now rose from their seats when human representatives entered a room. It was not love. It was fear. Human trade ships passed through contested space without escorts. Pirates who would have attacked any other species fled at the sight of human markings on a hull. Border disputes that had simmered for centuries were suddenly resolved when humans offered to mediate. No one wanted to give them a reason to remember what they were capable of. But the strangest thing was what the humans themselves did after the war. They stopped. The warships that had crushed the Carthax were decommissioned. The factories that had built weapons returned to producing consumer goods. The soldiers went home to their families and their farms and their universities. Within a year, it was as if the war had never happened. Catherall visited Earth again and found humans laughing in the streets, arguing about art and politics, rushing to concerts and sporting events. They were exactly as they had been before the war. Soft and strange and obsessed with coffee, He could not make sense of it. How could a species be capable of such terrible violence and such gentle peace at the same time? How could they build weapons that could crack planets and then put them away like toys they no longer needed? How could they look at the stars with wonder instead of fear after everything they had seen and done? He requested a final interview with Admiral Derek Holloway, who had retired from military service immediately after the war ended. The old man had returned to Earth and was living on a small ranch in a place called Montana. He spent his days raising horses and tending to a garden. Catherall found him sitting on the porch of a simple wooden house, watching the sun set over distant mountains. The Admiral looked older than he remembered, more tired, but his eyes were still kind. "Thank you for seeing me," Catherall said. "Thank you for telling our story," the Admiral replied. Someone needed to. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the colors change across the sky. "I have one question," Catherall finally said. "It has troubled me since the war ended." "Ask. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Admiral Holloway did not answer immediately. He watched a hawk circle in the distance, hunting for its dinner. His weathered hands rested on his knees. "Every day," he said at last. "Every single day. I remember the faces of the young men and women I sent to die. I remember the names of every ship we lost. I remember the look in Captain Torzi's eyes when she walked through that Carthage city, knowing that we had become the very thing we always feared becoming." He turned to look at Catherall directly. "We are not proud of what we can do. We never have been. Our history is written in blood and fire. We have done terrible things to each other and to our world. We know exactly what kind of monsters we can become when we stop holding ourselves back. Then why do you not abandon violence entirely? Why keep the knowledge of war?" The Admiral smiled sadly. "Because the universe does not care about our values. The universe is full of species like the Carthax, who see kindness as weakness and peace as an invitation to conquest. If we forget how to fight, we forget how to protect the things we love. And we love so many things." He gestured at the mountains, the sky, the horses grazing in the field. "We love music and art and laughter. We love our children and our friends and our homes. We love coffee and sunsets and the feeling of grass under our feet. We love life in all its messy, complicated beauty. And sometimes, to protect the things you love, you have to become something terrible." He sighed deeply. "The Carthax thought they understood us. They thought we were weak because we chose not to use our strength. They learned the truth. We chose peace because we knew what war costs. We built a gentle society because we understood the alternative. But when they threatened the things we love, we became what we had always been trying not to be." He looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "The universe should be grateful that we would rather plant gardens." Catherall stayed on the porch until the stars filled the sky. Then he said goodbye to the old Admiral and returned to his ship. He sat in his quarters and opened his journal to write the final entry. "I came to study a harmless species. I leave having witnessed something the galaxy had forgotten existed. Humans are not warriors by nature. They are builders, dreamers, artists, and lovers. They fill their short lives with music and laughter and a desperate search for meaning. They are kind to strangers and generous to enemies. They see beauty in everything, even pain. But underneath all of that softness, there is something else. Something ancient and terrible. Something that sleeps until it is awakened by the threat of loss. The humans do not seek war. They do not celebrate violence. They take no joy in destruction, and that is exactly what makes them so dangerous. I think now of an old warning I once found carved into the ruins of a civilization that no longer exists. At the time, I did not understand what it meant. Now I understand all too well. The warning said, Do not wake the humans. I finally know why. For when humanity advances to war, even the stars quake, and the galaxy will never forget what we witnessed when that gentle, coffee-loving species showed us what they truly are. May we never give them a reason to show us again. Kethril closed his journal and looked out the window at the stars. They seemed brighter now, and somehow, despite everything, more beautiful. Perhaps that was the final lesson humanity had taught him, even in darkness. Even after war, there was still beauty to be found. You just had to choose to see it.